Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. We're continuing on Book 5 of the Ethics, which concerns justice. The theme, all Book 5 deals with the concerns of justice. And remember, there's 11 chapters in it, so we're near the middle part of the book. And today we're looking at chapter 5 of it. Okay, so this is the question. And we dealt with the question of transactions and of the concerns of transactions and dealing with the question. First thing was the question of the just and unjust of the voluntary transactions, and he was going to say both involuntary and non-voluntary transactions. But now he's going to address the question that he idea of equality that he dealt in the previous chapter. Now he's going to deal with the new concept is reciprocity. Okay, let's look at chapter 5. Reciprocity is also held by some to be the just unqualifiedly, as the Pythagoreans asserted. Remember that using of the verb in the previous chapter, he played some wordplay, and from a literal point of view, Bartlett and Collins says it was suspect, and I think he's right. There's but it's done in a Pythagorean way. The argument claims to be. And therefore, again, he asserts the Pythagorean conception. For they used to define the just unqualifiedly as reciprocal towards another. So this idea of reciprocity. The word is antipepontothos. Stems from the verb to suffer in turn, right? To suffer in turn. And can have the sense as eye for an eye, right? This is the reciprocity. In other words, literally is the word. It means to suffer in turn. Antipeprontothos. Literally, it is to suffer in turn, harm for harm, right? Eye for eye. A suffer or to, literally, so therefore reciprocity. Harm for harm. Eye for eye, right? The Bible, reciprocity. The term reciprocity, we think, oh, well, thing for thing, right? But the literal meaning is more darker and a little more tougher. Harm for harm. Suffer and suffer in return. In turn, right? Okay. So. But reciprocity fits neither with the just in the distributive sense, nor with the just in the corrective sense. So therefore, reciprocity thus is neither in the sense of distribution and corrective. Although people want this reciprocity to mean also what is just according to Arithmedamos. Arithmedamos, the Greek in Greek mythology, Arithmedamos was the son of Zeus and Europa, who served as the ruler and judge of the dead. Right? Again, this is from Plato's Apology as well as the Laws. Right? The Arithmedamos would be the one who decides what. Therefore, for he should suffer the things he did when justice would be straight. Now, the word here, the term dike is rather dikesune, which can more precisely be pronounced as arbitration and the specific judgment regarding justice. So that this is not dike, justice, but rather dikosune. They did dikosune, which means the doing of justice, or the literally would probably mean the mindfulness of the just. This is more precisely the pronunciation of arbitration and a specific judgment. In other words, the doing or judging, making a specific judgment about then justice, or the doing of the just thing would be straight, right? Would be straight. For in many cases, there is a discrepancy between reciprocity, eye for an eye, literally the suffering in return, and the perinopotos, and what is just. Okay, there's a discrepancy between this reciprocity and what is just. For example, when a ruler strikes another, he ought not to be struck in return. For if someone strikes a ruler, he ought he ought to be not only struck but also punished, right? So therefore, there's in other words, it's not mere reciprocity that to strike a ruler. In other words, if the ruler strikes another, he ought not to be struck in turns. But if someone strikes a ruler, not only should he, in other words, the ruler strikes someone, so that he strikes him. Reciprocity, well, harm should be returned for harm, but no, he should not turn to harm. And if this guy harms this guy, not only should the harm happen, but more than the harm should happen, right? Um, Further, there's a great difference between what is voluntary and what is involuntary. So therefore, what is done, you punish, but a punishment for voluntary should not, a harm done voluntarily should be maybe punished harsher than a harm that is done involuntary, right? And likewise. But in communities concerned with exchange, so in communities concerned with exchange, the just in this sense, reciprocity is in accord with proportion and not in accord with equality. Holds them together. For the city stays together by means of proportional reciprocity. Now, this is a very important question here. And I think Aristotle hits on something. If society is communities, this idea, koinonia, the type of koinonia, if the koinonia in question is concerned or is held together by exchange. Exchange means shared utility, shared interaction and utility. If it's held together by exchange, reciprocity accords in proportion and not in accord to equality holds them together. So therefore, the idea is that the proportion of the thing, of what has been done. This is more important. The proportions of what has been done and how has been harmed is rather than that harm has been done and harm should be done equally. Interesting. Now, this equality is not only exchange of the communities that are held together by exchange. This is not only about monetary exchange, but I think it may be even the sharing of a common, right? The sharing of a life together in common. It has to be proportional in this sense, not equal in that outcome. Thus, proportional, not equal, not in terms of exact outcome, right? The city holds them together, for the city stays together by means of proportional reciprocity. Now, this helps us understand book 1 of the Politics, about the question of what holds the city, and actually book 3 of the city, to understand what holds the city together, what kind of bond. It's not a equal, in other words, it's not equality based on arithmetic or simple equality, but rather proportional equality in the sense. So this is a very useful correction and understanding, help us understand deeper. In other words, this is what is being said here is a kind of a prequel or something that is assumed to be understood later in the Politics, but sometimes people don't understand it. For either people seek to reciprocate harm for harm. If they do not, this is held to be slavish. Or if they seek to replicate good for good. In other words, if for either people seek to reciprocate harm for harm, or they don't. In other words, harm for harm, or if they do not, this would be slavish. Harm for harm would not be. This is something would be low, vulgar in that sense. They seek to reciprocate good for good, or they seek to. So reciprocate harm for harm or good for good. Both would be this idea of equal. In other words, not proportional. Therefore, they would be this sense of reciprocal justice, right? This reciprocal justice is kind of vulgar or slavish in one sense, right? And if they do not do this, there is no mutual exchange, right? And if people stay together through mutual exchange, and people state, in other words, if they do not do this, is that there's no reciprocation, then people either people seek to reciprocate harm for harm, and if they do not, that, in other words, if they do not do, okay, I understand that. If they do not, okay, sorry, I'm saying, okay, I need to correct myself here. I stopped myself. I read it a little too quickly, and I need to stop. This is the danger of reading sometimes a little too quickly. Okay, I just gave an example here. If you read it a little too quickly, you will maybe misunderstand read the phrase correctly. He says what? He says, for either people seek to reciprocate harm for harm or reciprocate good for good. If they do not do this, that is held to be slavish. In other words, when it's properly done, you reciprocate harm for harm, harm for harm. Okay, that's this phrase here, done in the middle, may be deceptive a little bit. This is why you have to look carefully. And I think maybe if you did it with saying it, in other words, it's both this. For people either seek to reciprocate harm for harm, or they seek to reciprocate good for good. If they don't do this, the failure to do that is slavish. That's how the sentence would be understood in the Greek in that sense. And if they do not do this, there is no mutual exchange. And people stay together through mutual exchange. And here's this. This is the very important thing. People stay together. They live together. They hold together. They bond. They form community because of mutual exchange. This is a sharing here. And that this requires reciprocity. So therefore, if you don't have reciprocity, then the system breaks down. So there is something. This is where you can see the kind of what we call the libertarian or the liberal dimension in Aristotle's argument here. There is in the question of this idea of exchange, of reciprocity, of what this action here. So reciprocity at one level is this kind of idea. If they do not do this, there is no mutual change, and people stay together by mutual change. Hence, two, people place a shrine to the graces along the roadways to foster reciprocal giving. For this belongs to gratitude. Be gracious, right? The gratitude, giving to the graces. One ought to serve in return for someone. One ought to serve in return someone who has been gracious, and one ought oneself the next time to take the lead in being gracious. Now, this is very important. 22, the graces, charity. Charity. This is where charity comes from, right? Charities. The charity, the graces or the charities were goddesses, right? Fathered by Zeus, embodying charis, grace, gratitude, and charm. This is from the Theogony. This is why this book is a fantastic book. Maybe someday we held a group of us held a online discussion group about this a couple years ago. Theogonies, and it is one of those great books. Maybe I will do a video of this. This is the Theogony is Hesiod, and Theogony is a kind of assumed here. The old this idea of the graces, right? And the idea here is that this is that line. For he says one ought to serve and return someone who has been gracious, and ought oneself the next time to take the lead in being gracious. Now, here, the translation of the last word, charanthesis, secures the connotation of two graces, but obscures the relation to the benefaction. Right? This is that word, this idea of the benefaction. Who's benefiting? The person who's. In other words, you're gonna do a good to somebody. You're gonna do a benefit. A great gracious is doing benefit or good to another. And the idea is that what you should return, the reciprocal. You should someone who's done good to you. You should do good to them. So therefore, not only doing reciprocity about harm, but also reciprocity about goodness. This is the perception of here, right? Good for good. The combination that aligns with the diagonal's proportions. The combination that aligns with the diagonal produces proportional reciprocal giving. For example, let A be a house builder and B a shoemaker. Alpha a house builder and B a shoemaker, and Y a house and D a sandal, right? This is that. Here is the famous to achieve proportional reciprocity, A must conjoin with D delta and B with gamma. And so the simplest sense, the equation would look out as this diagonal. A plus D equals beta plus gamma, right? House builder, in other words, this proportionality. But the mathematical proof of this reciprocity in this sense, but for the mathematical proof of reciprocity, we'll see Euclid's Elements, Book 6, 15. So that's a big difference here. Now, here, what Aristotle is doing here? He's saying that these two things. The house builder then ought to take from the shoemaker the work he produces and gives in exchange a share of his own work, right? This is exchange. If then the first is proportionally, if then there is in first proportional equality, and then reciprocal exchange occurs. So that, in other words, first there must be proportional equality between the things given. If there is a proportional equality between shoes and house building, then there's a reciprocity. Um, uh, First, in other words, if then the first proportional equality and then reciprocal change occurs, the proportional equality spoken of will take place. If not, the exchange is not equal and does not endure, right? In other words, it won't happen, okay? As long as it's voluntary. In other words, as long as it's, as if this is voluntary, it won't take place. But if there's force involved and this is done, then it may take place, but it's not a equitable exchange, right? Nothing prevents line. If not, the exchange is not equal and does not endure, right? For nothing prevents the work of one person from being superior to that of another, or greater than, larger, greater than that of another. These things ought, therefore, to be equalized in proportion. In other words, well, the house is bigger than the shoe, therefore you need to give me more shoes, or the shoes and other things, right? That needs to be equalized. For these things ought to be equalized. For this is the case also in the other arts, techne. For they would perish if the maker did not make both so much and such of a kind given to a product, and the recipient did not receive both the same amount and the same kind of product, right? There's reciprocality. In other words, exchange would not take place. It would not work. The arts would perish in that sense. The arts for them to work, to deliver other things, need reciprocity, right? That there's going to be some arts that are going to produce bigger things and not the same things. So, in other words, so much. If the maker did not make both so much and of such kind of a given product, and the recipient did not receive both the same amount and the same kind of product. For no community, koinonia comes into existence out of two doctors, but rather of a doctor and a farmer. And in general, out of those who are different and not equal. So, in other words, you're not going to have a community composed. This is a very important point. You're not going to get if everyone is the same thing. If everyone is the same thing, then you're not going to have a community. And actually, this is maybe the criticism of Aristotle. Aristotle makes a similar criticism of oneness, and Aristotle makes a criticism of Plato's Republic and the kind of justice and the cityness, as the city is kind of a oneness, let's see, right? That the city becomes one and it's no longer a city but a man in that sense. Here, Aristotle is saying that no, you cannot have an equal. In other words, the city or a community is differentiated, and it's not going to be of equals in that sense, but maybe of unequals. So it's going to no community, koinonia, comes into existence out of two people who are the same, two doctors, but out of a doctor and a farmer. And in general, out of those that are different and not equal, but these differing types must be equalized. So this is the paradox of koinonia. The concept of koinonia, and that the idea of a things that holds us together, is that it doesn't that if people are identical, then there's no need for koinonia. There's no koinonia. There's no koinonia of the gods in that sense. Gods who are completely self-sufficient don't need each other. Gods who are there's no koinonia for the completely self-relying and self-sufficient. They need something. They lack something, and they need the other. Koinonia, the possibility of koinonia is to become autarkos, sufficient. Okay, gods have no community. A god would need no community. A true god who is completely autarkos would not need community. Does not need anything. That it is out of need that you have community. And this is why therefore they come out of the different, and the community itself is that of different and unequal. But to make sure that the system works, there must be equalized. Okay, that's the whole logic here. Hence, all that, okay, now this is even more interesting. Hence, all that is exchanged must somehow be capable of being compared. So you need a mechanism of comparing the goods and the things done, right? For this purpose, money has arisen and has becoming a middle term, legal currency. This is the term Aristotle uses is nomasia, which means anything sanctioned by current or established usage, nomos, right? Or the coin of money, or current coin of money. This is that. In 6.1s, we treat krimatia as money, and nomasia as legal currency. But here we follow Book 5. We follow the English idiom. So this is why I disagree with in the earlier part, right? Later in Book 6, right? And also in that earlier in the book, he treated krimatia as money. No, not money. This is property. And nomasia, currency, means money. And this is interesting. For this to work, you need the money, which is what? It means nomasia, which means anything sanctioned or established usage, nomos, of nomos, established by nomos. Nomos creates the means, the law. The law is the means that makes the money is the thing, literally the nomasia, currency, has arisen as his middle terms. Now this is very interesting, and something by nomos, not by nature. This echoes this. The city is this. I'm going to go off here because this is a very important point. The city is by nature, right? But the city needs the politeia. The polis is the city. The city is by nature, but the city to be there, it needs the politeia and the plutumina, and both of these are acts of men. Therefore, there is a middle thing. In other words, nomos and phusos, right? that there is this middle term of something that is that fulfills. There is a nomos, or something made by man, that fulfills, that is not merely a creature of man's willing, but rather fulfills what nature intends. Nature wants something, but it doesn't have the direct means of delivering it. It points to it and directs it, but now human action is necessary to do it. Now the same is with money. Now, this, to understand this, that you have to understand this first before we take the criticism of money that will happen, or particularly money making that happens in Politics 1. In Aristotle's Politics 1, Aristotle is very critical, arguing that there is something unnatural about money making. It's true. There is something, he even says that there's something unnatural about it. It is to make up, it is, money making is there because it is the means by which the unequal become equal. Okay? This is what this point is about. In 1988 and 89, there was when I was in Dallas, there was this a German graduate student, female graduate student. I'm not gonna give her name. She was eventually would go to Toronto, and I don't know whatever happened to her. I suggested to her, because I was very much thinking about this question at the time, even though I was working on Kendall and equality, the problem of the question of the politeia. In other words, the relationship of the politeia to the polis, and the question of fusus and amos. And this, that the question of money echoed perfectly. Money, the politeia, and the role of nomosia are almost interconnected in terms of the forming of koinonia. Okay, this is interesting. That what is necessary for what makes koinonia possible, that makes the equality, makes the, what do you call, the ability to reach the middle term, right? In other words, that the purpose of money has arisen because has arisen and become in a way a middle term. The mesos. Money becomes the mesos by which the different parts are able to form koinonia and achieve reciprocity, because it allows differing things to be measured equally. It's a common reference point. Money becomes currency, becomes a means by which different things can be made, that we can have reciprocity and receive proportional goods, can be made to a way that you can get reciprocity, achieve reciprocity easier, smooth, more effective, more efficiently. Okay, this is the purpose of money in this sense. So let's turn it, for it measures everything, both excess and deficiency, so that it measures more. However, many sandals are equal to a house or food. Accordingly, as the house builder stands in relation to a shoemaker, so the given number of sandals must stand in relation to a house or food. For if this is not the case, then there will be no exchange, or koinonia. And this will not be the case if the terms should not be somehow equal. In other words, there's no exchange, or therefore no community. Money makes community possible. This is okay. This is I can understand why my friend Dennis Vermoosman and Dan Earl, and many of these, the what I call the libertarian Aristotelians, were, kind of, and how even Ayn Rand, when Ayn Rand reads this, she thinks, oh, this is. I agree with them. There is this, and this is why even Ober, was it, what's his Ober in his last book on equality and money, at Stanford, I think he's at. Ober and gang, Jacob Ober, I think, yeah. Um, Ober talks about this as well, and I think they're right in this. There is this kind of liberal dimension of this idea here of exchange and utility, and that therefore there is that there is no exchange or community, and this will not be the case if the terms should not how be equal. All things, therefore, must be measured by some one thing, as was said earlier. This thing is, in truth, needed, which holds all things together. So, therefore, this is interesting. That, in other words, for the purpose of koinonia, you need this artificial thing, this nomos, this thing established by nomos, law. But this is the fun part that libertarians miss. This is the problem. Nomos, law, convention of authority. In other words, this is the double side, that without the law, there can be no money. And without the money, currency, there can, we can have an artificial thing. No. In other words, until you have the nomo or the nomothetike, right? The not nomothetike, right? Nomomise. It's nomomise, not some other thing, not this sense of equity. Now, the libertarian would be right. Aristotle is not a pure libertarian, argues that the sense of proportionate justice would be good. And yes, the proportional argument is the argument the libertarian makes. And therefore, we could just have consensual agreements between everyone and everything would be okay. But no, the measurement, the problem of measuring things and the thing being measured is money. And money is always tied to nomos. And nomos is tied to a given lawgiver. In a given particular lawgiver with a giving authority, koron, rule, authority and rule, authoritativeness, which rule tied to an archon in that sense, of this a period of ruling in this sense. Okay. All things, therefore, must be measured in some by some one thing, as was said earlier. The thing is, in truth, needed, which holds all things together. For if people should not need anything, or not in the same way, then this is why this line is a very big chapter in that sense. There will be, they will neither there will either not be exchange or not the same sort of exchange. But money, currency, has become by agreement the kind of exchange representative of need. And on account of this, it has its name, nomasia, literally legal currency, because it exists not by nature but by law, nomos. And it's up to us to change it or render it useless. So it's something man made, man agreed to, man constructed, convention. So it allows for the fulfilling of what nature intends, but it necessitates an actual embodiment and agreement by men. Therefore, therefore, there will be reciprocity when terms are made equal, and the result will be that if the farmer stands in relation to a shoemaker, so the work of the shoemaker stands in relation to that of the farmer. But one must not bring the works into the figure of the proportion after they have been exchanged. If they are, one of the extremes will have both excesses. But one must do so instead when people still have their own things. So it's not in what terms after the exchange, because if they are, then one of the extremes will have both excesses in that sense, right? You have to understand this. You have to understand proportionality before the exchange, not in terms of the exchange itself after it. But do so, people have their own things. But one must do so instead when people still have their own things. In this way, they will be equals and partners in a community. since it is possible for this equality to arise in their cases. So therefore, this idea that that there is an equality that can emerge in their private cases, right? Let the farmer be alpha, his food be gamma, and the shoemaker beta, and his work that he is being equalized to gamma delta. If it were not possible to have reciprocity in this way, there would be no community. So, to have koinonia, you need reciprocity. Proportional, and reciprocity requires proportionality of the things that each one who is of the community contributes to exchange to meet the needs of the other. This holds people together as if they were some single entity, as is clear. In other words, this this need for each other, this reciprocity and exchange holds them together as if they were some single, not that they are a single entity, but as if they were. Okay, for when either both parties or one of them is not in need of the other, they do not undertake exchange, as does happen when someone needs what another has. For example, because they are in need of wine, people give their license to export corn. Right. This is 26. The last phrase, which is ungrammatical, is suspected by Bywater, who suggests the text may have been Lacana. Here, one might insert, as in the case whenever one does not possess what someone needs. For example, he needs wine while people are giving their licenses to export corn. But doing so raises other difficulties, so there is obviously no solution to this phrase. This is why this is a problematic phrase, right? This is why they give their license to people export corn. In other words, they want something. They want something, so they give their license to export corn to someone to get something that they could not get, right? Therefore, this exchange must be made equal. As for the exchange, that will occur in the future, right? If there is no such need of it now, money is like a guarantee for us that it will occur, and when there is a need for it, since someone who brings money ought to attain what he needs. Now, money undergoes the same thing as well. So therefore, first of all, money is the means of exchange, but then money undergoes this as well, this same thing as well, for it is not always possible for it to be equal. Whoa. Money itself, because not all monies, remember, things that are done are not equal to each other. It's not always possible to be equal. Nevertheless, it tends to stay more constant than does the value of particular commodities. So monies itself has the same problem that commodities have, but less so, much less so. But not all money is going to be the same. You're going to have a doubloon, you're going to have a gold, a pound, a dollar, or that. Different places will have different nomoses, and the different nomoses will have different currencies, right? Legal currencies. And the value of what is in the currency, well, this one has this much thing and this much. In other words, the currencies will have maybe silver, gold, or something like that, and the values will be different in the amount of the weight of the coin. And this is what it says, right? This is why they're not going to be perfectly held equal to each other. But it's going to be more so, right? Nevertheless, it tends to stay more constant than does the value of a particular commodity. Hence, all things ought to have a value assigned to them, right? The idea of value assigned to them. For in this way, there will always be exchange. And if there is exchange, there will always be koinonia. Very libertarian, very kind of at the same time, this is the idea that exchange is essential for community. Hence, by making things commensurate, and by commensurate, it means being able to similar, right? Equal similar value. Money, just like a measure, equalizes them. So money makes things equal in that sense. These goods and these things that we have, the products of our labor and our products of our services, are so that things that are needed by others and we have that they need, and the things that they need we have, and it's the means to allow for the smooth effect of exchange, right? To make things equals. For there is no community if there's no exchange, or exchange if there's no equality, or equality if there's no commensability. So there's an equation here. No community if there's no exchange, or exchange, there's no exchange if there's no equality, or there's going to be no equality. So the no community, no exchange, no equality. So no community if there's no exchange if there's no equality, no equality if there's no commensability. Now, in truth, it is not impossible for things that differ greatly from one another to become commensable. So, therefore, in truth, for truth, it is impossible for things that greatly differ from one another to become commensable. So, here's the problem. Here's the problem. Now, in truth, it is impossible for things to differ greatly from one another to be commensable. But it is possible to a sufficient degree in relation to need. So in terms of relation, in other words, in absolute terms, some different things cannot be commensurate. So some kind of actions and deeds simply are not, there's no commensurable things between them. But in regards to things in need, there is a degree in relation to need. So there must be some one thing that serves as a measure. And this is based on the presupposition or hypothesis. In other words, it's a presupposition, a hypothesis. Again, remember the regimes, this goes back to book 4, that all regimes, the things of the regime is based on a presupposition. Okay, there's a presupposition, a hypothesis. There is a basic presupposition that is called nomothetike, nomoesis. Hence, it is called currency, right? Legal currency, 27. See note 25 above. Right? This is that famous line. Okay, for it makes all things commensable. Since again, the political thing. This is a political thing. Currency is a thing created by a community. A community is a political community in a sense, right? Koinonia, a given political community. For it makes all things commensable, since all things are measured by currency. Take a house as A, 10 mina as B, and a couch as Y, and A is half of B, beta, if the house is worth equal to 5 mina, and the couch Y in terms 1/10 a part of B, right? This is 28. A mina was equivalent to 100 drachma, and in course of a Peloponnesian drachma was a day. A day was a good wage for a soldier. A house worth 5 mina, then or 5,000 drachma would take a soldier approximately 6 months, 16 months to pay, assuming no other expenses, right? So therefore, this is the perception of this, right? 16 months, 16 months to pay if that was the day, right? $1 a drachma a day. Accordingly, it is clear how many couches are equal to a house, namely 5. That there used to be exchange in this way, therefore, before the advent money is clear. For it makes no difference whether difference at all whether 5 couches are exchanged for a house, or for however much money 5 couches are worth. It makes no difference. It can be the five couches for one house, or the money of 5 couches for the house. Okay, right? Or the money 5 couches are worth. What the unjust and the just are then has been stated. So the just and the unjust has been stated. And with these things defined, it is clear that the just action is a middle term, a mesos, with respect to doing injustice and suffering injustice. For the former is to have more, and the latter is to have less than one ought. So in other words, In other words, the former is to have more than one ought, and the latter is to have less one ought. That's injustice, right? Justice is a certain middle term, not in the same way as the other virtues, but because it is bound up with a middle term. Whereas injustice belongs to the extreme. So the just belongs to the middle term, and the injustice is bound in the extremes. The just refers to that which the just person is said to be disposed to act accordingly. So his choice of what is just, in other words, according to his choice of what is just. So the justice refers to that by which the just person is said to dispose as act, according to his choice, a choice of what is just, and to distribute things to himself in relation to another, and to another person in relation to a third as well, not in such a way as to distribute money more of what is choice-worthy to himself and less to his neighbor, or of harms the reverse, but rather to distribute what is equal in accord with proportion. In other words, the question of proportion, either benefit or harm in degree of proportion. And similarly, in the case of another person in relationship to a third. In other words, the question of these two people, this person, what should be done is not to my benefit at this. I shouldn't distribute things that I get the better and you get less, but rather I should distribute to what is proportionally equal. But injustice involves the opposite, distribution with regard to the unjust. And this is excess or deficiency of the beneficial or harmful, respectively, contrary to what is proportional. So injustice is extremes, that is excess or deficiency of what is beneficial or harmful in the cases, and contrary to what is proportional. Hence, injustice is excess and deficiency, since it is bound up with an excess or deficiency. And excess in one's own case of what is unqualified beneficial, and a deficiency of what is harmful. In that sense, this is unjust. In other words, hence injustice is excess and deficiency. It's bound up in the case of excess and deficiency. An excess in one's own case of what is unqualifiedly beneficial, and a deficiency of what is harmful. And in the case of others involved, injustice is as a whole similar in that sense. But it is contrary to what is proportional in one way or another, whether by assigning too little benefit or too great harm to another, as the case may be. With respect to wrong done, the lesser wrong is to suffer. In other words, with respect to the wrong done, the lesser wrong is to suffer injustice, the greater to commit an injustice. In other words, with respect to the wrong done, the lesser wrong is to suffer injustice, right? And this is a wrong. To suffer injustice is a wrong. It's wrong. But to commit injustice is to suffer injustice is bad, but to do injustice is worse. It's the greater injustice. The greater the wrong. The wrong. It's wrong to suffer. But it's worse to do injustice, right? That's that line here, right? The greater and the lesser. Its respect is one. Lesser wrong is to suffer injustice. The greater wrong is to commit injustice. And as for what concerns justice and justice, then, that is what the nature of each is. Let it has been stated in this way, and similarly also what concerns the just and unjust in this general sense. So we have in chapter 5 a kind of conclusion of what just. It says, as what concerns justice and justice, then, what has been the nature of each, therefore the question of what is the nature of each, let it stand, let it has been let it have been stated in this way, and similarly as to concerning the just and the unjust in this general sense. So this is why Book 5, Chapter 5 is considered like the discussion of what is right by nature, what is just by nature, what is dike by nature in that sense. So let's stop here. If you have any comments or questions, please bring it up, and I will respond to them when I see them. If you have any question about this chapter by 5 in this very complex chapter and very long chapter, please give it to me, and when I see it, I will respond to it and highlight it. If you've liked the video, please hit the like button. This is a very complex chapter. This is a very good, and it also points to why the question of natural right is tied to the origins of community. So again, this is a very important chapter of the politics and why it's so long. I mean, the ethics, and it's also important for the politics and why it's so long and why it ties to, it's constantly dealing with the question of community in that sense, right? Which is the basis of what is the polis is. The polis is a koinonia. It is the form of koinonia that achieves autoktos, completeness in that sense. So please put your comments and questions and issues. If you liked it, hit the like button, hit it like. The more you like it, the better the algorithm hits to it. If you've not subscribed, please, if you liked it, also share it on social media. Share it on social media, share it wide. Share it with your friends. If you've not subscribed, please subscribe. Consider subscribe. Encourage others to join the site and subscribe, because growing, it's very useful to grow, because the more it grows, the more benefits we are able to get in that sense, the more attention. If you didn't like it, you can of course say no, hit thumbs down, but say why in the comments. We can all learn from it. We can learn from the criticism and things like this, so we can all benefit. This is the purpose of this, is benefiting from it. Another thing is to do is that you can follow me on social media. My social media links below. If you want to know more about me as a scholar and as a researcher and what the things that I do in my research, you can follow this academic social media links below the social media links. If you want to be able to help me to do what I do financially in some way, you can do so through the links of Subscribestar and Patreon listed below. The addresses of links. It's links. They should be links, but they're not necessarily links always. To Patreon or Subscribestar below. If you want to, another way you can do so is by buying one of my books. You can do so at your bookstore or an online bookseller. The books are listed below. If you want to really help, if you know someone, if you know someone who would be interested in studying the politics and doing this, encourage them to buy the Lulu book, or buy them the Lulu book directly by Lulu. Yes, you might have to pay the shipping, but this is the way I get the profit I would get the money the bookstore would get. I will still get some money from, I don't know, Amazon hasn't been paying. So if you're not, I'm a little annoyed about Amazon and other booksellers. Maybe people buying it, maybe not. I have not gotten money from Amazon lately, so who knows what's going on with Amazon. But if you want to directly help me and you buy it through Lulu, that would be a very useful thing. And that's it. Next time you see us, we'll look on Chapter 6, and we'll look and continue on here. We're past the midpoint. Okie dokie. Take care. Bye-bye. Have a good day.